Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, December 5th, 2016 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll for us, please?
Councilmember Boger, Councilmember Wagner. Here. Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel. Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Corsi.
Here.
And Student Representative McCarthy.
Here.
Thank you. I know Brent had mentioned he'd be here for the workshop. I haven't heard anything from Jennifer.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought he was missing the whole evening, but
He sent me a note, said that he should be able, or that he wouldn't make the 7 o'clock meeting, although he may make the end of it depending on how long it lasts, so. Good. Are there any members of the public that would like to address council as we get started? Yes, sir. If you would come on up to the microphone, give us your name and address, please.
My name is Mark Zach. My address is 1415 Northeast Bloomridge Road. And I'm here because I was advised by city staff that I should come address the council on this issue. It has to do with water bills. It may seem kind of silly, but I'm a 25-year resident of Washougal. I own rental properties and I manage them. And every couple of years or so, I have issues with water bills having to do with water leaks. I have currently 2 issues now with the water department that they're just not returning phone calls. They're sending past due bills to tenants that don't even owe the money and threatening to shut their water off. So it's gotten kind of ridiculous. And so I would ask the council's help, someone to take this bull by the horns and give me somebody to speak to get it resolved. I shouldn't have to come to a council meeting and address the council and waste their time with something this, minuscule. But, and my second comment on the water billing is, I think the council should consider going to a monthly billing. And the reason is, because when you have a leak issue, I have properties where the tenants pay the water bills, and I have properties where I pay the water bills, because they're not separately metered. And if you have a leak on, let's say, day 1 of the billing period, and you don't catch it till the end of the billing period, you've got 2 months of water leak that's going somewhere. And either I have to pay for it, or the tenant has to pay for it, and then the city also has to, refunds 50% of that, which I think is unreasonable. First of all, refund 100% of it, or go to monthly billing, so I can catch the problem quicker. I can at least try to fix the problem before it goes on for 2 months. And this has happened to me a couple times, and I've been told by Lee at the water department that they only refund 50% of the overage, which I don't understand why. And so the 2-month cycle just seems to be, I don't know, it's difficult when you're a landlord and you're trying to tell tenants, hey, if you got a toilet leak or something's going on, let me know, I'll come in and fix it. And, there's apathy with the tenants, and they don't want to do it, or they're afraid to call you, or whatever it is. And the water leak goes on for 2 months until I get the water bill. So I don't go into my tenants' homes every week and check their toilets and their sinks to see if they're dripping or leaking. So monthly billing, I could catch the problems quicker, we could save water, I could keep my tenants' costs down and my costs down. Thank you.
Does Lee have the addresses that we've got in question?
Yes, I've been in contact with Lee's office and have been promised to return phone calls and never get them. Yet bills go out to tenants that don't even owe that money, like I said, with threatening shutout notices.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, monthly billing has been, as some of my council colleagues know, has been a topic near and dear to my heart. And I really would like to seriously explore monthly billing and see where we are with that. I know that there's some additional costs that I'm a little skeptical that it's really that high, but I would like to have a more thorough examination. I have asked for that a number of times, so how do my other colleagues think about, what do they think about that?
I would like that too.
Yeah, I think there's been general agreement that we'd like to look at it.
And I don't know who dreamed up the current billing statement, but it seems like an expensive format. my wife has some experience with, you know, these types of medias, and you have a triple perforated, you know, adhesive, you know, document that is an expensive document to send out. I just can't imagine that there isn't a cheaper way to do business there.
I totally agree with you. That's how my junior high report cards came out and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And that's, yeah, how long ago that was. You
Yeah,
can-
some printers are making a lot of money off the city, if you ask me, but. So is there someone that can help me from this point on? Or-
Nope, if you're telling me that Lee has your information, we'll make sure that you get contacted tomorrow.
Okay, appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Dave, you had, so.
Yeah, we've undertaken, in fact, we hired some assistants, Mr. Lewis, to help us do an analysis. We anticipate coming back to the council sometime during the first quarter next year to share the results, so you can have a full portfolio of information, and we'll make some kind of a recommendation. There are costs. We understood the skepticism about the internal review, so we asked for an external review. There are costs that have been corroborated but refined. So we'll, looking forward to sharing that information with you around the impacts of monthly billing and whether or not that's something that we should be looking at or not. I do know that the team has been engaging with Mr. Zach. I don't have details of that, but we'll engage with him.
Do we do the perforated threefold billing in-house, or is that contracted out?
It's not contracted out.
We do it here.
Correct.
That's what I thought, but I'm.
So let's try and do these, you know, are other folks that would like to address council? Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Jenny.
I'm Virginia Frosch, or some people know me as Jenny Frosch, 757 B Street, Apartment 7, Washougal, Washington. I'm here to tell you that I hope to go back on the Parks Board, and I applied for it, and I just want you to know who I am.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to comment to council? Okay. Going into new business, actually old business. Mitch, I'm gonna let you take these as you'd like. I've got Granite 3 first.
Thank you, Your Honor, Counsel. We have, these items are all on for hearing this evening, but I thought we would take a little bit of time to walk through the development agreements again themselves to make sure that we can address any issues or questions that you may have. Our city attorney and myself have been working closely with the applicants in the development of the agreements themselves. I believe that we're all on the same page as it relates to the development agreements themselves. So I do want to talk about kind of what we will be covering tonight, right now, at this workshop, what these development agreements do, specifically also what they don't do. So we're clear about that. And then what's next for the development, in particular, each of the developments. We'll talk about specifics on each of the DAs, and then I'd like to walk through as quickly as I can, really the comments that we've been received, and I routed out that packet to you today. Some of those comments were in your packet when it was routed, but the majority of them were not submitted before the packet was routed. So what do the developments do? They lock in the densities, the proposed densities for each of the development. Again, remember there's 3 of them, Granite 3, Marlin Development, and North 20. This pertains to all the developments. It locks in the general layout of the proposed development. It locks in the trails and the open space requirements. In particular for the North 20 and the Marlin development, it locks in that collector that we've been talking about, and that modified collector. And it vests the development regulations, particularly stormwater. That's why we're trying to get all this done before the end of the year. And probably most importantly, what the development agreement does is it allows the development to proceed. You recall that for the Granite Highlands, we have the moratorium in place for the Woodburn Hills sub-area. And for the other 2, the Marlin development and North 20, we have the UGA moratorium in place. So these development agreements are required for these processes, these developments to move forward. So I mean, that is a very critical point. What they don't do, quite simply, they don't approve the land division. They have nothing to do with the land division itself. It's just allowing them to move forward. So what does that mean for them moving forward? Each of the developments will have to submit preliminary land division approval, i.e. a subdivision approval. They will have to submit a preliminary plat. They'll have preliminary engineering plans that will address roads and utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, drainage, erosion, all of that. Critical area reports will be required for each of the developments. If there are slopes and wetlands and habitat, critical aquifer recharge areas, all that will have to be addressed at the time of preliminary plat. We'll have to go through SEPA again. We did a SEPA for this action. This is called a non-project action. There'll be a project action SEPA for the actual development itself. There will be a public hearing in front of the land use hearing examiner. Once they have that and they have their approval with several conditions of approval, they'll have a final plat they'll have to go through. They'll have to submit a final plat. That'll include final engineering plan review and approval. And most importantly, they have to demonstrate compliance with all the conditions of approval that they received. And so that's what is next for all of these should they move forward. So I'd like to get into the specifics of each development agreement, starting with the Granite 3 development located in our northwest city limits there. The proposal actually is for 60 acres. Actually, these two properties here are also in the development agreement as well. Remember, that was revised after the first time that we looked at that. This property's been in the city since 1994 and came in as R175, and it was designated in the Woodburn Hills subarea in 1997. And currently we have the moratorium in place for everything within the Woodburn Hills subarea. So the site is approximately 60 acres in size. As I mentioned, it's zoned R175. The allowed density in the R175 is 5.8 units per acre. Would have a yield there on that portion for 348 units. Their proposed density is 2.5 units per acre, or 152 units within that area. They have approximately 15 plus acres of trails and open space. And their specific design and aesthetic standards, these are detailed within the development agreement itself, but their construction style, single family, detached. They have building facade diversity, critical areas retention. They have identified areas with Oregon white oak. And they'll have to, again, later do all that critical areas assessment associated with the subdivision itself. And they are in compliance with the existing development regulations. What they're requesting, as I mentioned, specifically, they're requesting to be exempt from the moratorium that we have in place. They will vest to the current development regulations. They're asking for a park impact fee credit for the proposed trails that they are proposing within the development. And they also have requested a variance to street tree heights, anywhere from 20 to 30 feet. And although this point will probably be moot after this evening if we adopt the stormwater regs, because as part of that adoption, we're lowering the street tree heights down to 30 feet. So they may have some variance in there down to 20 feet. And again, they recognize the area for views and they want to protect those as well. So here's the site looking within the sub-area itself. Again, those additional two parcels, or one parcel, I guess, right there. And here's the preliminary layout of the proposed plan. We have received, I believe the next slide, yes, comments. We have received several comments on the proposed development itself. They are in that packet that I routed to you. Some of these were in the packet that you already were routed electronically, but there's Tara Vargas had several comments related to Granite Highlands, concerns with the high density and the habitat loss, Oregon white oaks, and priority habitat. Again, priority habitat will be addressed at the time of subdivision. Density is one of the things that you are looking at as part of your development agreement. Which wanted the public hearing this evening, which we are having. Donna Vanderwegen, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right, but concerns again with soil erosion, landslides, and priority habitat. Again, all issues that would be addressed at the time of development itself, the subdivision itself. And then important information sheet regarding Granite 3, again, routed by Tara Vargas. Concerns with erosion, hazard, potential instability, older landslide debris, and slopes greater than 50%, all addressed at the time of subdivision approval. Terry and Sarah Waters, an email, concerns with traffic, multiple years of excavation and construction that would occur, wildlife, cost of infrastructure. Again, the developer would be putting those the infrastructure in associated with the development itself. Concern that could we handle the population? You know that this is an area that we plan for growth, and actually we plan beyond this area for growth for our 20-year comprehensive plan. Traffic, again, whether or not environmental impact study was done. Environmental impact study is not required for subdivision approval, especially when we have considerable development regulations in place. And then height limits. The current height limit within the city is 35-foot height limit, and unless that would change some point in the future, that is what would be applicable here as well. The Parkers, Donald Parker had concerns again with density and runoff and traffic, habitat, hummingbirds specifically, geological concerns, and impacts on city services. And Wright Vanderwegen had issues with being a wooded track. Actually, they bought because they thought it was a protected wooded track. Erosion and denuded soils and water runoff. Again, a lot of those things will be addressed at the time of subdivision approval. And just received today were from Roger Haig, I'm sorry, concerns about discrepancies in the SEPA checklist that noted was 135 homes as opposed to what's proposed of 152. I'm not sure if the applicant utilized their previous SEPA checklist and probably the information associated with the previous SEPA checklist that they had. This site was approved in 1998 as development is known as Granite Highlands, and this was the last phases of that development, so I'm not sure if that information just wasn't correlated. Again, it's while it may be a discrepancy, it's not really relevant to the non-project action of a development agreement. Again, as I mentioned, they will have to do another SEPA project action, SEPA, associated with the subdivision itself. Also has concerns with the Oregon White Oak, as I mentioned before, we would address that. And the last one that I received was from Carol Parker, and I really didn't have time to look at this one too close, but again, I just looked like Habitat has some issues with the ones accessing off of Stonegate Drive, and not the 4 lots off of Stonegate, so that would be these in that location, I believe.
Phase 4.
Here?
There you go. 4 lots on phase 4.
These 4 here? Oh, right here. Got it. And she would like she requests the lot access only from Stonegate Drive immediately be changed to open space and incorporated as such in the development agreement. So she basically doesn't want phase 4 to develop as proposed or lot 152, that she would like that to be all open space. Then there was several comments from ecology, very standard water quality issues related to ecology.
Which is 152 on there?
That one right there, so it's 152 and then those 3 lots.
Are there other homes across the street accessed off of Stonegate?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay. So, moving on. If that's all right, I'll move on to Marlin. And then, Marlin Development.
Just one question. I'm looking through these public comments. Are they all related to just Granite?
No, I'm gonna try to, I've highlighted my copies, but I spoke to the ones that were related to Granite 3. There's some on North 20 and one on this comment, and I'll break that out.
Okay.
Do you want us to have our questions for the individual developments as they come, or do you want us to wait till you're done?
It probably would be better to wait, because I think that if I can get through all the developments
Okay.
themselves, because if we start with just Granite Highlands, we may not get through everything that we need to get through, and that's just my suggestion.
It's fine.
Okay, moving on to Marlin Development, located off of Crown Road, north of McKeever and 30th. It's a 14.2 acre site. It is zoned R110 currently, and in our proposed zoning for January, it's also going to be R110. The allowed density is 4.3 units within the R110. That would yield them a maximum of 61 units. They are proposing a density of 2.7 units per acre, or 38 units total. They have open space and slopes and wetlands areas of approximately 3 acres. And they, again, construction style is single-family detached. They have LID. They are actually incorporating some LID stormwater, low-impact development stormwater, and stormwater aesthetics. They are protecting the critical areas. And in the development agreement itself, we also, this is the west end of the collector itself, so we have language for the developer to work with us, specifically when we talk about that modified collector, if we move forward with that. So we will have consistency through the area for that collector. And it does also require fencing along the collector to be uniform along the collector. And it is in compliance with the UGA land use study. Again, what they're requesting, important, moratorium exemption, so they can move forward with their development. They want to vest to the current development regulations. They have a road modification for the internal loop road. They have an internal loop road that they wouldn't have sidewalk on, but it would be a gated community. That portion there would be gated. And that's the modification that's part of the development agreement. They're requesting transportation impact fee credits for what they would construct related to the collector itself, just the collector. And here is that proposal, 38 lots. And in looking at, there was one comment, it was part of another comment from Mr. Harper, Marlin Development. He doesn't believe that we should allow the houses to back up along Crown, that we should have spacing between Crown, and I believe it's on a dangerous corner, and that although they are proposing sidewalks along that portion as well, and are required to have that as well, so.
On the sidewalk thing, is there gonna be allowances for, as Crown spreads, for bicycle lanes in the future? Are we boxing ourselves in? Or do we ever anticipate Crown growing to four lanes? Is that something that should be considered? Because that kind of spoke to me a little bit, the Bishop letter, about future expansion.
So they'll have to, whatever improvements they're required to make there will have to be consistent with whatever we've got in our transportation capital facilities plan, which I believe, Rob, is a 3-lane sidewalks, bike lanes, collector, or is it
Probably
major collector, or whatever it's called.
So there will be room
There's-
based on what's gonna be put in there for that expansion.
We will make sure there is.
They're dedicating the appropriate right-of-way for that.
Okay.
Right.
I have a question about the Bishop letter. I don't know the Bishop letter. I
Is that the one that came in today?
It was the one you just read.
Harper?
Harper, sorry,
Okay, all right.
sorry.
That's what I thought it was, but when you said Bishop and I asked about that in the email, I was like, okay.
He's a bishop.
Okay.
Or was.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
My
Got it, yes.
If I could just add real quick, the county transportation plan includes exactly the same plan as we have. 2 lanes, center left turn lanes, sidewalks and bike lanes. So Crown Road,
Federal standard?
I'm sorry?
Is that not a federal standard?
Not so far as I know, but it's, the county, the RTC, the plan that the county and the 2 cities have shown RTC are identical, is the point. And that's key because there are 3 jurisdictions involved in Crown Road.
Yeah, I think what we will have is, we will have the sufficient right-of-way to make the improvement. What I don't anticipate at this time, at least, would be us putting bike lanes in there right now. While we'll have the area for that, because you basically would have a bike lane for that length and that's it. But we would have the area for that once we made the improvements, north and south.
Thank you.
And that was the only comment that was associated with that development.
Yeah, you've got, go ahead.
Okay,
We got another one that just came in just a few minutes ago.
Okay.
I'll forward it on to you so you
Thank
have it
you.
for your records.
looking at the North 20 development, south of Southeast 23rd Street, within the Northwest UGA. This is approximately 100 acres. The zoning on the property currently, you'll recall, is R110 and Employment Center. We are proposing that change as part of our UGA land use study. It will have 4 designations on it: R115, R110, R175, and R15. The lower density would be to the south, and then the higher density as you move higher as you move to the north. Based on 100 acres, I did some calculations based on what we are proposing zoning-wise, and their units per acre maximum is 547 units. They're proposing across the whole site 2.8 units per acre, 281 units total. They are having open space, trails, parks, and wetlands, approximately 28 acres worth. Their design and aesthetic standards, again, construction style. The LID stormwater, again, they're doing the stormwater aesthetics related to that as well. Open space, parks and trails, and critical areas retention, and fencing along that collector, provisions in there to make that and keep that consistent. And again, compliance with the UGA land use study. What they are asking, again, is the moratorium exemption. They need that in order to move forward. They want to vest to the current development regulations. There's a road mod. We've talked about that on several occasions. We'll do that again, but the road modification for the proposed collector. They are also requesting transportation impact fee credits for the collector itself. And again, this is our standard collector, residential collector, 70-foot right-of-way, 10-foot travel lanes, bike lanes, parking on both sides, landscape strips and sidewalks. What they are proposing is a reduced right-of-way, 62-foot right-of-way. You'll notice that they are doing 10-foot drive lanes as requested by the council. And we are also not having parking along this collector, as there's no direct access to it except at the intersections, and then there's a detached 10-foot pedestrian sidewalk associated with it. That's the modified end, and this is the rendering that would look as if you're looking east. And then the proposed development itself. And looking at the comments associated with this, Doug and Mary Brewer, they had concerns with traffic related to the development itself. You will recall, as part of the UGA land use study, we just had a report on that. We went over the traffic report that we did for the entire sub-area. We noted, volumes and whatnot. We had areas of concern to the south, Washougal River Road in particular, but no, fatal flaws associated with that traffic study for the build-out of the area. And then Mr. Harper has concerns with the density, 3,000 to 5,000 square foot lots within the within this area. Concerned that it was a plan that for a 20 to 30 year build out, and that he wasn't told that there were people looking to develop the property, and that doesn't want property values to diminish. And he's requesting that the moratorium be extended for more TAC review to be done to address his concerns. And his request is please to vote no on the North 20 development agreement. And I believe that is all the comments, again, except for from the Department of Ecology, standard water quality stuff that we would address at the time of development. And I did one I did print off right before I came in here, which was for apologize from the original from Mr. Campbell, and then affirming that is from Sandy Buswell. Again, it looks like issues of traffic. Construction traffic. Large trucks, yes, construction associated with construction of the development itself, again, which we would address with the subdivision itself. And then that's all the comments that I have received so far.
Council questions?
So the zoning there really isn't a zoning for this area as of now,
For which one?
for the granite, the 20 Pines. Because
North 20?
North 20?
North 20, yeah.
There is zoning. It's
Well,
R1.
what are we calling the zoning then?
The zoning is R110 on the south portion, and to the north is Employment Center.
Okay, so R110, 10,000 square foot.
Correct.
But our hope was to try and get to the zoning of the Berger-Abrams study.
Right.
Which was this tiered zoning.
Correct.
And if you look at the zoning for that more dense area was supposed to be R15, right?
Correct.
But now we're down to 3,000 square foot lots on some of those. Is that the minimum lot size, or?
They proposed it varying in size in that area from 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. Correct.
And I know that they cut down the number of houses in there, and they put in park space and open space, but I have to wonder about 3,000 square foot lots. Are those detached or attached? Or I think they mentioned this before, I just can't remember, but we never saw actual lot sizes in there. And if we were trying to kind of go with the gist of the Berger-Abrams study, it's a lot smaller than, and there's no PUD, so to speak, because there's no zoning.
Right, and I think correct. They are required to comply with the UGA land use study and through this development agreement. But I think that the UGA land use study also contemplated that there would be PUDs that would be allowed, especially as it relates to protection of critical areas and open space requirements that would allow you to transfer that density. I think that, even on their, when I quoted the 500 and some odd lots that could be done on the whole site, that's gross density, that's based on the whole thing if you develop it. Obviously, there's limitations to that. I think what they've done in looking at their density, based on the allowed area that they could actually develop, they could put 319 lots within this area. And then they're proposing 262. I don't know, if it's an attached or in that
Detached.
portion? It's all detached in that,
It's 282.
282.
Not yet.
And the average lot size in that lot is 5,260 square feet.
The smallest lot size is,
3,000, the way it's represented today.
I don't know, that's just my concern is that, are we following what we're trying to get to with the Berger
Well, I think that,
ABAM study?
like I said, I think even the Berger ABAM study contemplated that there would be, variances within that, or PUDs and allowances and for density transfer and whatnot. I think it's still thought of that and contemplated that, especially as it relates to open space and critical areas. And so I think that as you look at this, as it graduates from the lower density down to the higher density, and still allows them to get a density that makes sense for the development itself, I think that yes, I do believe it is consistent with the UGA land use study. If we were going to look at it that every lot had to be 5, every lot had to be that doesn't account for any of the the dedication of open space or the dedication of parks that we've identified on that UGA land use study, and the trails and so I do believe that it is being consistent with that.
I mean, we're coming off of something that was R110. Is the road infrastructure even ready for that? Up Crown, up 280, is it 282? For
A portion of it's R110.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're coming off of it's employment center, and so that is a completely different traffic and transportation issue, and that's why we did, as part of the UGA land use study, we did a very robust traffic study to look at the full build out of this, and actually I believe that traffic study actually looked at even a fuller build out than what we're looking at for this area. So, and it didn't identify any major flaws or we had actually more criteria or more impacts on the east side of town with traffic signals required, and a couple of them on the east side of town for development. So I mean, the area itself, the entire northwest urban growth area was studied as part of that traffic study, and that full build out development of that entire area, again, didn't have any fatal flaws as it pertains to traffic. Now, there are impacts, you betcha there are impacts associated with it, and there may have to be at some point further mitigation as other areas may develop. But again, the study itself right now didn't anticipate or didn't foresee any of those.
Dave?
Mitch, refresh my memory. Which was the development that had where we had resident concerns about the trails?
I think all of them have been, but the Granite Highlands, I think, is,
That's what I thought.
and this one has,
Yeah.
I think what you're thinking of is,
the Berger ABAM study.
no, is this one, is the Landgravers concerns through this area. I think it was this one too, the concerns with the trails that they showed up. I think Larry is here. Larry?
With the transit problem?
Well, it was
Yes.
specifically the conceptual trails on the Berger ABAM study. Though.
Correct. This proposed plan that we're looking at right now does not make that connection. That would be something that we would be looking at doing at some point in the future.
Is there a requirement to have those trails?
there's a requirement as part of your development agreement to have what we're representing here, but what you're talking about, I think, is those trails itself, and if you recall what I had said last time was that we have a whole other analysis that once we have these, once we adopt the zoning in January, the comp plan, that's really, our next step is transportation, capital facility plan. We have to crack that open and make sure we got all that right. Our parks plan, which is where those trails would come up, we need to look at that as well. Again, sewer and water.
Will that be done during the coming year?
Yeah, I mean, that's our project list after this.
I would like to raise that issue at that time, because I've been looking at studies that were done in England about the connectivity of various housing developments with pedestrian trails, and the crime increases that resulted were pretty significant. So I'm very concerned that we're connecting the entire network of housing with trails that will bring these problems to areas that don't have them now.
Well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that that was one of the things that when we looked at through the UGA land use study, was we looked at trails and connectivity for the entire hillside, because what we identified was on the west side, a park within the county in Camas there that is utilized quite frequently and lots of trails through it, and we identified that we would like our future constituents to be able to walk on a trail and maneuver over that way and go and utilize that trail system. That was very much at the forefront of us looking at in the UGA land use study.
And I'm disagreeing with that.
And that's fine. I think one of the things that out of that, at least in terms of a conceptual plan that this council adopted, it had that connectivity. And I think that as it speaks to the Marlin development specifically and this development, is because those are the only two that were in the UGA area, land use study area, that they're consistent with that plan of that connectivity. Now there's more, when we crack open the parks capital facility plan, there's more work that we'll have to do, and that trail connections will have to be addressed, and whether we want them or not. But we have, obviously this development itself isn't making that connection down proposed through Larry's, but it is putting a park that we identified on that UGA land use study as, we want something right in this area.
I don't have any problem with the park. It's the connectivity that I've got a problem with, and I've had a problem with it since I was on the planning commission. That goes back 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
To 2007. If we don't have to address this tonight, that's fine, but I do want to bring it up and address it at the appropriate time, because I don't want to see this.
Mm-hmm. And the trails, when we talk, I think holistically about trails itself, that will be in the context of the park capital facility plan.
It's the same thing, the disagreement we had about the cul-de-sacs and the connecting through cul-de-sacs across the creek where I live.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to see that. It connects housing areas that don't need to be connected. It connects wooded areas that don't need to be connected. And I don't want to see that happen. I like the idea of parks. I like the idea of trails within the parks. I don't like the idea of trails between parks. Or between parks and housing areas.
It should be an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to be in the minority on this one, but I want to be heard.
Well, isn't connectivity the preferred, I've heard that is a desirable thing over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, obviously there are those that feel that it's, has its share of problems, and but in terms of, in terms of land use planning, yes. I mean, you want trail connectivity through development, especially connecting parks and development. Access to schools. There's a school just to the, northwest of this.
there's my problem. Land use planning and land use planners are things which are dominated by people who want these things. We call these people liberal progressives.
Well, and there
I'm
are,
not interested in it.
I understand that. I think that there are others, though, that, I mean, it is a, you know, there are those that share your point of view, and there's others that share the idea that we need to have that connectivity. And all I was saying is that as part of the UGA land use study, that was one of the things that we did look at, was making that trail connection. That was pretty much in the forefront that we were looking at.
Here's
Again,
my concern. You've got people who bought property. It was a certain way when they bought it. Now we're gonna change that. We're gonna introduce into their neighborhood elements they don't want in their neighborhood, that we don't want in their neighborhood. And we're gonna give them access. I think that's a bad idea. I don't think it's fair to the people that bought the property to begin with.
and there we will have I'm sure, a very robust discussion as part of the Parks Capital Facility Plan.
I think it'll be lively.
Well, just a question, make sure I understand. Only the Granite development proposes to be consistent with the new LID
No.
development standard?
Well, they proposed some, but Marlin also, they actually all, Marlin specifically mentions LID, but not, they are vesting for the stormwater standards that they have in place. They are voluntarily putting in LID.
Okay. All right, and Granite the same way?
Granite, I believe, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, they actually talked about LID along the streets and where they could.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Any of the three developments?
And we have a public hearing this evening. This was just to get everything out in anticipation of that.
And I wasn't going to, I mean, the packet of information related to the public comments, I wasn't gonna go back through that again as part of the hearing tonight, but they are all part of the record. And my presentation for the hearing itself will look strikingly similar to this, so those that weren't able to be here tonight will at least have the benefit of hearing some of the same information, but, so I'm sorry that it'll sound repetitive to you.
I saw a comment in the public comments that one of these areas is a wetland or was a wetland.
No.
There's wetlands associated with Granite Highlands.
Granite 3.
Uh-huh, and, which the development knows about.
I think what Brent's talking about is three of the letters, to a large degree, read that it was always going to be 58 acres of
Yes,
wetland open
yes.
space dedicated forever.
And that's not correct.
Not correct at all. Like I said, it's been in the city since 1994, identified as R175. It was preliminary approved for subdivision in 98 as part of the Woodburn Hills sub-area. But their entitlements lapsed, and so they want to go back through the process again, and they have to adhere to the standards that we have in place today related to that.
There might have been some misunderstanding in terms of some nomenclature. I think that was referred to in some of the communications. The property was held in trust because of, not sure exact financing mechanisms that were deployed, if it was in bankruptcy or foreclosure or whatever the process was. It was held in trust, and then it came out, it was purchased. And I think there might have been some confusion about what that meant. And I think there was some reference that, it was held in trust as a open space, and it was just a financial proceeding, I mean, it's a significant financial proceeding.
Yeah.
It was a trust and a financial proceeding.
Yeah.
Dave?
Subject to what we find out at the public hearings tonight, I will vote for this with two caveats, or for two reasons. One, I want to see development in Washougal. Two, because of your assurance that we're going to have a chance to address the trail issue at a future date.
Well, and I think that the plan itself is, while it's still conceptual, it does not propose or identify a trail system through that area. That I think specifically the concerns of Mr. Landgraver, and I'm sorry, I forgot your son-in-law's name.
Chris Trotter.
Chris Trotter, yes, thank you.
Thanks.
And also Dickerson, it goes through their property too.
Michelle?
What was the minimum lot again on the Granite 3, the minimum lot size? I think didn't they have, I couldn't tell because it's such small type, did they have the
6,000.
6,000?
That's an average?
That's the
No,
minimum.
Minimum, that was the minimum,
Average is about 9,000.
Oh, okay.
1,000. And when would like slippage be looked at? A lot of people mentioned in their letters.
Erosion control, again, that's all part of, they're required as part of the subdivision itself to give us a preliminary engineering plan that would address that, but really when it comes down to, and that includes geotechnical work and everything else, but when it comes down to construction plans is really when they're gonna start, addressing that. And quite frankly, things change from preliminary to construction as well, because, it may be that they can't do something that they anticipated at the time of preliminary plat because of what they find out later, and so things do change.
On the gated, did you look into what the code is on that?
Yes, they're actually, the prohibition about single family is
Single entrance.
single entrance. It's actually, there isn't a prohibition for single entrance.
Oh,
There was a prohibition, or that chapter is not applicable if it's just to one access to a house. It's not applicable, but there's no prohibition for multiple access.
Okay.
Brent?
I have a question for the city attorney on procedural matters. My day job requires me to be in Vancouver at 7 o'clock when we start our regular council. But I suspect I can be back for some of these public hearings. If they're broken out separately and I happen to arrive in the middle of one of the public hearings, I probably should not vote on that particular issue.
I would concur, if you're missing any of the public record while you're gone, I think it's probably improper for you to vote for that particular development agreement.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, based on that restriction and the importance that I attach to Mr. Boger's opinion, is it possible to reschedule the hearing so that he can make it?
Well, unless if council wants to continue
Well,
into next week or the following week for a council
I
meeting.
was thinking of later on in the agenda this evening.
There really isn't much on the agenda other than these items.
We have the LID.
Yeah, but that's not gonna take,
The
well,
I actually wanted I would have liked to have the development agreements done first before the LID, because, we're requesting that they vest for the stormwater, although the action for the LID is, the adoption wouldn't be effective till December 31 at 11:59, but, just to try to keep things straight, I wanted to have the DAs done first, so those are the standards. And
Are you worried about the LID being, well, the LID ordinance wasn't effective till the end of the year.
it's not, but I just
So-
wanted, I didn't want us to adopt new stormwater regs, and then we have DAs that are going back to old stormwater regs, but that,
I wouldn't
All right.
worry about that.
you're the attorney.
Is there a particular
The attorney.
these three that you were most concerned?
What do you think?
I'm not terribly worried about that, quite honestly. If the effective date is later, then the adoption date doesn't mean a whole lot, quite honestly.
Okay. Do whatever.
But I don't like people, making special arrangements for me. I know this is in my area of professional expertise, and I've got my opinions about these agreements, generally favorable. That I don't, if you want to do that, that's fine. I will be in touch with the mayor by text about what's going on.
Are there any issues with them specifically that,
No, not.
okay.
Well, the one issue I did have is something I've seen in some of these plans. Right now, I happen to know from conversations with realtors that there's smaller lots, less expensive houses are in this sweet spot between, the high 200s and the mid 300s is really the desire, the sweet spot and what you can move for the real estate market in. They have a variance in that particular development, they have a varying density. What would happen if they come in and do the high-density development first, and then suddenly the rest of it remains fallow? Would we be seeing some more applications coming in for increasing the density
I
on
think
that?
that's physically possible to do, because given the infrastructure needs that are associated with that, I mean, it's basically flip-flopped. If it was the other way around, that if they were gonna do all the high density at the northern, or at the southern end, that's where the infrastructure is, and they would be able to, yeah, and that's why they wanna move, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, they were gonna move from that way and move
North.
to the north, yes.
Okay. That gives me some comfort.
And just looking at the contour lines, which are hard to see, in that brown piece as opposed to the orangish piece, it's hard to see how you could break that up smaller.
Yeah, I don't think that they have any intention of moving it smaller or, just, and like I said, I believe it's physically impossible, given the infrastructure needs, to construct this portion first, or even really this portion. It's really, this is the only portion where we have sewer, water, and the ability, to serve that without the infrastructure needs and requirements being done by the developer in order to move the rest of it forward.
So are there any of the three of them that you have
No,
more
that's-
desire to be here for than not?
Um,
We did
Probably
get a note-
Granite Highlands would be the one that is probably the one I'd like to be here for most.
Okay.
I did do my presentation, I did it similar to how when we had the multiple hearings, where I had, because the statutory, the notice and SEPA and all that stuff was the same, I kind of did one slide for all three. I don't know if that's a concern, that if I need to repeat that, should Councilman Boger show up in the middle, I'd have to repeat that, so you have that on the record.
And
I'm less concerned about the staff report than I am about the public
public
comment.
Staff reports
Public comment,
Yeah.
got it.
already,
Yeah, and we did have it set up for Granite to go first.
I can change that. Okay.
I just want to kind of underline what both Councilmember Shoemaker and the mayor said. I would love to hear any concerns that you have on the off chance that you're not there, because it would make me think about them.
didn't know I was that special.
Well,
I think that's true of pretty much anyone on council, that if you have special concerns, I really would love to hear them so that I get a chance to think about it.
we did get a note from Councilmember McDaniel too, while we were here, that she will not be here this evening, so that, if you're not here, that brings it down to 5 people that are gonna be pretty much making the.
So what I would
decision.
suggest is, doing consent as we wouldn't normally,
Item by item by item.
and
by-
then move the LID, which I have some comments about too, but
Me too.
as they say, you can't fight City Hall, and I think that's one of the, in this case, we're not fighting City Hall, we're fighting the state,
Yeah.
DOE.
And my presentation on stormwater isn't that, it's not that long. I wasn't
Okay.
gonna go through item on them. I'd left that open for council discussion for the most part. So, I mean, if there's a lot of discussion items, obviously we have staff here to talk about that.
Okay. So,
Dan?
I do have questions about the density in some of these projects, but I'm eager to hear the comments in the public session, so I'll wait till then.
Anything else from council? Okay, we're at the next opportunity for anybody in the public that would like to comment to council before we adjourn this meeting. Just so you know, we do have 3 separate public hearings this evening, one for each one of these developments. So if it's something where you can be here for the 7 o'clock meeting and make those comments during the discussion on those development agreements themselves, that would probably be the most ideal for everybody involved. But if you cannot stay, or if it's a hardship to stay, you're more than welcome to make those comments now as well. Okay. With that, unless council members have anything else, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. We'll be back